Well, we'll be hearing from them in a moment, but first our political editor John Hess on the issues facing our county councils.
It's from this spot at Beacon Hill near Loughborough that you get a really fantastic view of the whole of the East Midlands. And when it comes to county council budget pressures, if you want the big picture, it's not a bad place either. Take, for example, Derbyshire. It's facing budget cuts of £157 million over the next few years. That's the equivalent of 1,600 job losses. In Nottinghamshire, the cuts total is £154 million and 750 jobs. Since the age of austerity, it's lost almost a quarter of its workforce. And in Leicestershire, the County Council is talking of cuts of £110 million. That's the equivalent of 700 posts. It's already had to lose 750 jobs.
But do we need to take a new look at how our public services are provided?
It's a place which is run not just by local councils, but by...
I'm walking in nearby Bradgate Park with David Parsons. There's not much this former leader of Leicestershire County Council doesn't know about local government. We're here because the park isn't run by a council, but as a charitable trust. Could it be a model for cash-strapped councils to follow?
Well, it's nice, isn't it? I mean, local people are on the board. I think people ought to look at places like this to see how services can be run. The last thing I want to hear, frankly, is let's have local government reorganisation, because it won't save any money in the long term. Let's have services which are responsive to people.
Welcome to The Hub, a new one-stop shop for public services in Hinckley. Here the council shares premises with other service providers. Is this the way ahead?
We share services with neighbouring district councils. We've worked across county border with some of our colleagues in Warwickshire on skills and economic regeneration delivery as well. We've moved into new council offices which we share with both the County Council and Job Centre Plus, which saves the public sector well over £200,000 a year.
Back to Beacon Hill, and the sky's rather overcast. But what's the government's blue sky thinking on future funding of local services?
What we're seeing around the country is local authorities working together in partnership across the public sector. There's potentially £20 billion of the savings there. Let's remember, local government as a whole will be spending £117 billion this year. That's £3 billion up on last year. And all the authorities in the East Midlands have managed to increase their reserves over the last 12 months quite substantially.
And how about this for efficiency saving? Merge the district councils into one.
Maybe an alternative is to look at some unitary districts and some collections of districts to form councils, which I think will be far better and more in touch with the people than a unitary county would be.
Oh, unitary status. I mean, what will that do to the average person on the street? I do believe you need to cut the number of councillors. That's a good thing. Local government, national government, all the agencies need to cooperate.
But getting that cooperation may require a brisk walk in the park, just to clear the head and think afresh.
Well, some interesting ideas there, so let's put them to our council leaders. First, Alan, the local government minister there, Brandon Lewis, says you've got reserves to tap into. If you really wanted to, I suppose you could even sell this building.
Well, of course, we could sell the building, although in this economic climate, I'm not quite sure whether people would be queuing up to buy it. Brandon Lewis made a point about reserves. In fact, of course, we all know that you can only spend reserves once. We have spent reserves and continue to do so. We reduced our reserves considerably. We'll have reduced them by half by this time next year. And we use them, for example, by giving £20 million for the widening of the A453.
So time for radical change is what John's reports seem to be saying.
I think so. I think to suggest that we can go on doing things exactly as we've done them in the past has gone.
We can introduce, we're looking, I'm sure all of us are looking at different ways we can innovate and cut out duplication. We're working very closely in Derbyshire with the NHS, for instance, to see how we can integrate health and social care, because we know there is duplication. People get visited by different people from different organisations going through different assessment
processes. And that's not very efficient,
basically. It's not very efficient. But what we know is, if we do that, the savings don't always manifest themselves in the right place. So in Derbyshire, if we were to invest £1 million more in preventing people from tripping and falling and breaking their hips, it would save £12 million in A&E. But the money doesn't move back from A&E into our pockets.
And Nick, one of the things that you did this week was you published a report basically saying that we could save £30 million a year if we abolished smaller councils. Is that realistic? Is that likely to ever happen?
That came about, Marie, because last summer we consulted the general public about our savings, and one of the things they said back to us, not surprisingly, too many councillors, too many councils. I then went down to Parliament to meet my 7 Leicestershire members of Parliament, and one of the things they said to me, have you considered it? I said, no, we hadn't considered it, but I was perfectly willing to commission some independent work to see what it would save, and then I promised my...
It's a huge amount, isn't it?
Yes, and I promised my district friends I'd publish it at the same time I got it, so it was unedited, if you know what I mean.
So what do we think about that as an idea?
Well, these things are always worth considering, but unless you get a full buy-in from all of the districts, and I understand that didn't happen in Leicestershire, it's going nowhere. The other thing is, of course, that we've got a general election in 2015. This is not on any government agenda at the moment.
So you don't want to make any changes before that then? Because you might have a completely new regime.
We're making changes all the time. I mean, we're working, as Anne's just said, very closely with other organisations, other councils.
Do you work together? Do you work with Nick? Do you work with Anne? I mean, you're neighbouring authorities.
We do some work together. We're talking about that more and more. We're looking to work with Derby City. We in answer to your previous question about whether it's worth taking out a complete layer of local government, in Derbyshire and I think in Nottinghamshire, we've taken a more evolutionary approach to it. So we're creating what's known as joint committees, where all the councils in our area come together. So in Derbyshire, it's the county, the city council and the 8 districts coming together in one place, so we can share costs that way.
Don't you work, Nick, as an authority with Nottingham City Council?
Yes, we share a lot of back office services with the city council.
People might be surprised about that.
Well, we go where we can do a deal. I mean, originally we nearly had a deal with Nottinghamshire, and then that fell through, but we've always had the deal with Nottingham City. I work exceedingly closely with my city mayor in Leicester. Our LEP is Leicester and Leicestershire. I will work with anybody who can save me money on backroom services so I can spend them on frontline services.
As leaders, you are both putting up council tax while Nick has quite clearly frozen his. Why shouldn't you just take the money from the government and keep the tax down?
Because we have to make £154 million worth of savings.
Yeah, but he can do it. Why can't you?
We've decided that we need to take control of our own destiny, that a 1.99% council tax increase is a relatively modest amount, and that will enable us to improve and deliver our cost-effective services to the people of Nottinghamshire in years to come. I mean, we've had 4 years of council tax freeze. That's cost this council an enormous amount of money, running into the millions. The council tax increase that we're proposing will bring in 15 million over the next 3 years, and that's important income for...
Why not freeze the council tax down in Derbyshire?
I mean, it was not a decision we took lightly. We know how tight people's household budgets are, but the issue is that the money that you get from the government as a grant, there's no guarantee it will continue. In the next few years, that could disappear.
Is that right, Nick?
I was assured by Secretary of State that the grant is in the base. I have gone up by 1%. By increasing council tax by 1% enables me to get £2.5 million in from the government. And I thought in Leicestershire that at the moment people are struggling, that I didn't want to increase the burden on what they pay.
It is incredibly difficult to plan. We're talking about £500 million worth of public money to spend.
But do you think your electors will think it's too much of a risk? The people who vote you?
Yeah, we did a big, extensive consultation through the summer and the autumn as well. And what came out of that very, very loudly from people in Derbyshire was they value the services.
Okay.
And they would,
well, we'll be finding out what people think about the services in a moment. Clearly this...
That came out in our consultation as well. I mean, we had 38,000 people who responded to our big budget consultation.
And you've been listening to what they have to say.
Council tax, and they told
Murray,
us...
none of us want to do this.
Absolutely
none of
not.
us want to do
Absolutely
this.
not.
But we have to live within our means.
So that's where we are, isn't it? And that's clearly what the politicians think.